Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. So Joe Rogan is this mega popular podcaster. I think he's probably the biggest podcaster out there who's going to move to Spotify and sign an exclusivity deal of a whopping $100 million. And that says a lot about the man and his influence. And Joe Rogan likes to talk about everything and anything. And his latest podcast made some kind of controversy. He voiced his opinion about video games, and obviously a lot of people replied back with videos. And it was interesting to see different ideas from other people. So for example, Upper Echelon Gaming talked about this comparison between Jiu-Jitsu that Joe Rogan spoke about and video games. There are other YouTubers that spoke from different angles as well, and it is always nice to have different opinions. And here I am. I want to talk about my opinion, how I think it shapes up. First, there is this talk about analogy between Jiu-Jitsu and video games, and I think that's a pretty flawed comparison, because the premise there is that if you, for example, practice jiu-jitsu, you could be a master or a guru of jiu-jitsu and have followers, and it could impact not only your physical condition but also your financial condition. It's going to be like a win-win situation. There is a big problem with that. That is, not every person who practices a sport is going to be good at it, so good that they're going to be like gurus or masters of said sport and make a living of it. Yes, there is this physical benefit, but even then, sport could lead some people to addiction and to destroying their bodies. The premise is also not correct, because let's say, for example, someone who watches movies a lot, does that give them the ability to be good movie makers or actors? Absolutely not. Or if someone reads literature a lot, plays and works of fiction, does that going to make them good writers? Not at all, because it is more about talent rather than just reading. And the same could be applied for anything that you practice, and you won't necessarily make some kind of financial benefit from what you're doing. And it is also the case with video games. Some people make money from video games and some people don't. And then he speaks about video games as fun, as something that could be very addictive. That in of itself is not really something new, because there are some people who have bad impulse that makes them play video games and neglect their duties. For example, someone who works starts skipping work, or someone who goes to school affects their school life, their social life, so on and so forth. And yes, that could be a bad form of addiction that's going to hinder your life. But the problem is that addiction isn't only in video games. There are people who are addicted to drugs, who are addicted to alcohol, who are addicted to gambling. And these things are 1,000 times worse than being addicted to video games. But still, addiction is addiction. It's not just about video games, but it's about the pleasure that one finds in said activity. And because we humans are creatures that seek pleasure every now and again, addiction could be a serious matter for some of us if we don't really take care of our time and know our priorities. And then there is another problem, is that Joe Rogan spoke about video games, and this is a very sensitive topic, not because of the nature of people who play games, because some people will say, yeah, gamers aren't going to accept criticism and whatnot, but it's rather about video games being used as a very weak and blatant and disingenuous excuse for talking about problems that happen in the real life. Like some people who use violence and who abuse the Second Amendment, for example, in the United States, and shoot innocent people, and all of that thing. And then you have those filthy politicians that jump the gun, and that instead of talking about real problems like mental health, they just blame video games. So people who play games will always be very sensitive when it comes to video games being called out, because, as I said, some people just misuse this concept of video games and try to make it the cause for every problem that happens around the world. And from that angle, I can see why gamers are upset and why they would call Joe Rogan out for his opinion. And I think that opinion, at best, is a very poorly articulated one. He didn't make the case clear. He didn't specify what is the real problem with video games. He was just speaking in general and saying that they are fun and whatnot, but everything that is fun, is kinda addictive, and he didn't specify who is the demographic that he speaks about when he says that video games are a problem. He didn't give any examples about real life problems that video games caused, and so that made his statement rather very vague, so stupid that people would just call it out. I'm not going to say Joe Rogan meant this or that, but the way he worded his words was very, very poorly done. And when you even see some hypocrites like the World Health Organization speaking about video games as this kind of addiction or mental health problem in some extreme cases, and then when this current pandemic broke out, they just labeled video games as a good way to spend time and not succumb to mental health issues, depression, and whatnot. So yeah, video games are used a lot of times in a very poor way to just dismiss real conversation about real problems, and when someone like Joe Rogan speaks about them, it will just validate those stupid opinions. And because Joe Rogan, whether we like it or not, is a very popular person, a lot of people will take his words as factual evidence, quote him when there is this discussion about video games. Anyway, thank you for watching, and what's your opinion about this matter? Leave your comments down below, and I will talk to you again soon. Have a good one.